You know that feeling when you're watching someone you care about struggle, and there's almost nothing you can do to help them? When poverty isn't just about empty pockets, but about stolen dignity, crushed dreams, and the slow, agonizing realization that the world might never see you as fully human. That's where we're going today. We're stepping into 1840s St. Petersburg with Fyodor Dostoevsky's very first novel, Poor Folk. And here's something beautiful about this story. Dostoevsky wrote it when he was desperately poor himself, struggling with gambling debts, living in cramped quarters with a friend, knowing exactly what it meant to count every kopeck and feel society's cold indifference. This isn't just a story about poverty. It's about two souls trying to hold on to their humanity when the world keeps telling them they're worthless. It's about love that can't quite speak its name. It's about the books we read to escape our lives and the letters we write to feel less alone. So settle in. Let me tell you about Makar and Varvara, two beautiful broken people whose story will stay with you long after we're done. Part 1. The letters begin. Picture this. A shabby room in St. Petersburg. Not even a real room, actually. It's a corner of a kitchen separated by a screen. This is where our protagonist, Makar Devushkin, lives. He's 47 years old, a government clerk, and from his grimy window, he can see across the courtyard into another window. That's where Varvara Dobroselova lives, a young woman, his distant cousin, barely scraping by in rooms just as miserable as his own. But here's the thing, despite living so close, they don't visit often. Instead, they write letters, constant, heartfelt, desperate letters. The novel unfolds entirely through these letters, and that choice by Dostoevsky is brilliant. We're not watching these characters from the outside. We're reading their most private thoughts, their confessions, their shame, their tiny joys. It's intimate in a way that makes your chest tight. Makar's first letters are almost painfully cheerful. He's trying so hard to sound upbeat, to hide how wretched his life really is. He tells Varvara about his day, about the other clerks at the office, about the weather. But between the lines, you can feel his loneliness. This is a man who is invisible to the world, and these letters to Varvara are his proof that he exists, that he matters to someone. Varvara writes back, and her letters are different, more reserved, more melancholic. She thanks him for his kindness, but you can sense she's carrying some deep wounds, something in her past that haunts her, and so their correspondence begins. Two poor people clinging to each other through words on paper. Part 2. Makar's World. The Rat in the Kitchen. Let me tell you more about Makar because his character is heartbreaking and beautiful in equal measure. He works as a copying clerk, one of those government workers who sit at desks all day copying documents by hand. It's mind-numbing, soul-crushing work. He's been doing it for years, and he's never advanced, never earned much, never been noticed. He's a ghost in a uniform. His living situation is even worse. He rents that corner of a kitchen in a boarding house, separated from the cook and the other tenants by just a thin screen. He can hear everything. Arguments, crying children, drunken fights. There's no privacy, no dignity. He describes himself in one of his letters as a rat in society. Think about that phrase, a rat, not even a person struggling, an actual rat scurrying around the edges, unwanted, disgusting to others. But here's what makes Makar extraordinary. He refuses to give up his sense of self-worth. Yes, he's poor. Yes, society treats him like garbage. But he clings fiercely to the idea that he's still a good man, still honorable, still capable of love and generosity. When he gets a little money, what does he do? He sends gifts to Varvara. Books, mostly, because books are everything to these two. A little tea, some ribbons, things she protests she can't accept because she knows he can't afford them, and she's right. Every gift pushes him deeper into poverty. He pawns his uniform. He goes hungry. His clothes become so ragged that his coworkers start mocking him, calling him names, treating him like he's not quite human. But he keeps sending gifts, because loving Varvara, taking care of her in his small way, is the only thing that makes him feel like his life has meaning. Part 3. Varvara's story. The weight of the past. Now let's talk about Varvara. If Makar is all nervous energy and desperate cheerfulness, Varvara's quiet sadness. She's young, maybe in her 20s, but she's already been beaten down by life in ways that would break most people. In one of her letters, she opens up to Makar about her past. And this is where Dostoevsky shows us what poverty really does to people, not just economically, but emotionally, psychologically. Varvara grew up in the countryside as the daughter of a steward on a prince's estate. Life wasn't luxurious, but it was stable, happy even. She remembers running through fields, breathing clean air, feeling safe. Then everything collapsed. Her father lost his position, and the family moved to St. Petersburg. And let me tell you, cities devour people like Varvara's family. Her father, once a proud man, became bitter and violent. Her mother fell into a deep depression, barely speaking, barely eating. They had no money, and the creditors came like vultures, taking everything: furniture, clothes, even little trinkets that held sentimental value. When Varvara was 14, her father died. Just like that, broke and gone. She and her mother ended up moving in with a distant relative named Anna Fyodorovna, a cold, manipulative landlady who pretended to help them, but actually used them. Anna ran some kind of shady operation. The novel hints she might have been involved in prostitution or matchmaking poor girls to wealthy men. Varvara lived in that house like a prisoner, aware that Anna saw her as a commodity, not a person. But here's where a sliver of light enters. Varvara meets a young tutor named Pokrovsky. He's hired to teach her cousin, but Varvara starts sitting in on the lessons. Pokrovsky is sickly, poor, irritable, but brilliant, and slowly, carefully, they fall in love. It's not a grand, sweeping romance. It's quiet, tender, built on shared books and stolen glances. Varvara saves up every kopeck she can to buy Pokrovsky a complete set of Pushkin's works for his birthday. She can barely afford food, but this gift mattered. In the end, she lets Pokrovsky's father give him the books instead, because just knowing he received them is enough for her happiness. That detail destroys me every time. That's love, not wanting credit, just wanting the person you love to be happy. But the story doesn't end well. Pokrovsky dies young, his lungs giving out. Varvara watches him waste away, powerless to help. And when he dies, she's left with nothing but grief and the crushing weight of poverty once again. So by the time she's writing to Makar, Varvara is a woman who has already lost everything. She knows how cruel the world can be. She knows that love doesn't conquer all, that good people suffer, that hope is a dangerous thing. Part 4. The power of literature, books as lifelines. One of the most beautiful threads running through poor folk is the role of literature. Makar and Varvara don't just write letters, they share books. They discuss what they're reading, they argue about stories and characters. Books become their shared language, their way of understanding the world and each other. Makar is especially passionate about literature. He reads everything he can get his hands on. When Varvara lends him Gogol's story The Overcoat, he's devastated by it. The Overcoat is about a poor clerk, just like Makar, who saves up for months to buy a new overcoat only to have it stolen. The loss destroys him and he dies. It's a brutal, sad story about how society treats the poor as disposable. And Makar, he's furious. He writes to Varvara, essentially saying, why would anyone write something like that? Why make us feel even more humiliated? That clerk in the story, that's me, and everyone will read it and laugh. It's such a raw, honest reaction. Makar doesn't want to be a tragic figure in someone else's story. He doesn't want pity. He wants dignity. But here's the deeper truth. Makar needs literature. He reads to escape, yes, but also to feel connected to something larger than his miserable daily existence. Books remind him that he's not alone, that other people have struggled, that stories, even sad ones, matter. Dostoevsky himself is having a conversation here. He's responding to Gogol saying, yes, let's write about poor people, but let's let them speak for themselves. Let's give them interiority, complexity, humanity. That's revolutionary. In 1840s Russia, poor people were often depicted as comic relief or pitiable objects. Dostoevsky says, no, they're full human beings with rich inner lives. And that's what makes this novel so powerful. Part 5. The Descent. When everything falls apart as the letters continue, things get worse for Makar. Much worse. His clothes are now so ragged that people mock him openly. His coworkers treat him like a joke. One day, a button pops off his uniform at the office and he's mortified. It's such a small thing, but it symbolizes how he's falling apart, how he can't even maintain the bare minimum of respectability. He starts drinking more. Varvara sends him a little money. Money she desperately needs herself. And instead of using it wisely, he buys vodka. It's self-destructive, yes, but also deeply human. When you're that ground down, sometimes you just need to forget for a few hours. Then Makar makes a mistake at work. He copies a document incorrectly. His superior calls him in, and Makar is terrified he'll lose his job. He shows up trembling, expecting to be fired, humiliated one last time. But something unexpected happens. His superior looks at him, really looks at him, and sees a broken man. And instead of punishing him, the superior does something shocking. He gives Makar 100 rubles. 100 rubles, a fortune for someone like Makar. And then even more incredibly, the superior takes Makar's hand and shakes it. That handshake. Do you understand what that means? For a man like Makar, who's been treated like a rat, like garbage, like he doesn't exist, someone in power treating him like an equal, like a human being, is almost too much to bear. Makar is overwhelmed. He cries. He feels for maybe the first time in years, seen. He pays off some debts. He sends some money to Varvara, which she returns because she's worried he'll spiral again. For a brief moment, there's hope. But of course, life isn't that kind. Part 6. The cruel ending, love and loss. Here's where the novel breaks your heart completely. A man named Bykov appears. He's a wealthy landowner, and years ago when Varvara was young and living in Anna Fyodorovna's house, he had some kind of relationship with her. The novel hints that it wasn't consensual, that something shameful happened. Maybe he seduced her, maybe worse. Varvara has been carrying this shame for years. Now Bykov is back and he proposes marriage. Varvara is conflicted. Bykov is not a good man. He's cold, calculating, but he's rich. He offers her a way out of poverty, a life where she won't have to sew until her fingers bleed, where she won't have to live in a freezing room and wonder where her next meal comes from. Makar is devastated. He's been in love with Varvara this whole time, even if he's never quite said it directly. And now she's going to marry someone else. He writes to her, begging her not to go. But his letters are desperate, frantic, pathetic even. He has nothing to offer her, no money, no future, no security. Just love, and love, as Varvara has learned, isn't enough. Varvara makes her choice. She agrees to marry Bykov. In her final letters, she's detached, almost numb. She writes about Bykov's practicality, how he's reasonable with money. She's already adjusting to her new life, already leaving Makar behind. And Makar, he's destroyed. He's rambling, crying to hold on to Varvara even as she slips away. The novel ends with Varvara leaving St. Petersburg with Bykov, and Makar is left alone, sitting in his corner of a kitchen with nothing but his letters and his grief. Part 7. What it all means, the philosophy beneath the pain. Okay, so let's step back. Why does this story matter? What is Dostoevsky really trying to say? On the surface, Poor Folk is a social critique. Dostoevsky is showing us the brutal realities of poverty in 19th century Russia. He's saying, look at these people, look at how the system crushes them, how society treats them like they're worthless. This isn't right, but it's deeper than that. This novel is about human dignity. It's about the struggle to maintain your sense of self-worth when the world keeps telling you you're nothing. Makar's tragedy isn't just that he's poor, it's that he's invisible. He works hard, he's kind, he's generous. But none of that matters to the world. He's a cog in a machine, easily replaced, easily forgotten. And yet he refuses to see himself that way. Even at his lowest, he insists on his own humanity. That's heroic in its own quiet way. Varvara's tragedy is different. She's been taught that her value is tied to men, first her father, then Pokrovsky, then Bykov. She doesn't get to choose her own path. Her options are marry a man who abused you and live comfortably, or stay poor and miserable. Those are the only choices poverty gives her. So when she marries Bykov, is she selling out? Or is she making the only rational decision available to her? Dostoevsky doesn't judge. He just shows us the reality. Sometimes survival means sacrificing love. Sometimes the world doesn't give you good options, only painful ones. There's also a question running through the novel. What is better, to be poor and happy or rich and miserable? Makar argues in his way that he could live without money if he had love and literature. He'd rather be poor and connected to someone than wealthy and alone. But the novel doesn't entirely agree with him. Because poverty isn't romantic, it's grinding, degrading, soul-destroying. Makar says he could live without money, but we watch him fall apart because of it. Dostoevsky isn't giving us easy answers. He's showing us the complexity, the tragedy, the impossible choices. Part 8, Dostoevsky's breakthrough. Why this novel changed everything. Here's something incredible. When Dostoevsky finished Poor Folk, he was 24 years old and completely unknown. He gave the manuscript to a friend who passed it to two young writers named Nekrasov and Grigorovich. They stayed up all night reading it. And when they finished at 4 in the morning, they ran to Dostoevsky's apartment, pounding on the door, shouting, "Do you understand what you've written? You're a genius!" Then they took the manuscript to Vissarion Belinsky, the most famous literary critic in Russia. Belinsky read it and declared Dostoevsky the new Gogol. When Dostoevsky met Belinsky, the older man embraced him and said, "You have been given a gift, treasure it." Imagine that moment. You're 24, broke, unknown, and suddenly the literary world is calling you a genius. Poor Folk became a sensation. Critics called it Russia's first social novel, a socialist masterpiece. It launched Dostoevsky's career. But here's the tragic irony. Just a few years later, Dostoevsky would be arrested for revolutionary activities, sentenced to death, and at the last minute, literally standing before a firing squad. His sentence would be commuted to hard labor in Siberia. He spent 4 years in a prison camp, 4 more in exile. By the time he returned to St. Petersburg, he was a different man, harder, more religious, more obsessed with suffering and redemption. And yet the seeds of everything he'd later write, Crime and Punishment, The Brothers Karamazov, Notes from Underground, are already here in Poor Folk. The compassion for the downtrodden, the psychological complexity, the existential questions, the sense that life is deeply, tragically unfair. Closing, what we carry forward. So what do we take from Makar and Varvara's story? Maybe it's this: we all deserve to be seen. Makar's greatest suffering isn't hunger or cold, it's invisibility. It's the feeling that he doesn't matter, that his life is meaningless, that no one would care if he disappeared tomorrow. That's a profoundly modern anxiety. How many of us feel like Makar sometimes, working hard, trying our best, but feeling unseen, unappreciated, like we're just going through the motions? And Varvara's story reminds us that choices are rarely simple. It's easy to judge her for marrying Bykov, but she's trapped by her circumstances. She's making the best decision she can with the options she has. Dostoevsky isn't preaching. He's not telling you what to think. He's just saying, here are two people. They're flawed, broken, struggling, but they're trying. Doesn't that count for something? Poor Folk is ultimately a novel about compassion. Dostoevsky is asking us to look at people we might normally ignore, the clerks, the seamstresses, the invisible workers keeping society running, and see them as fully human, to recognize their pain, their dreams, their dignity. Because if we can't extend compassion to the Makars and Varvaras of the world, what does that say about us? Final thoughts, so there you have it. Poor Folk by Fyodor Dostoevsky, first novel written by a desperate young man who would go on to become one of the greatest writers in history. It's not a perfect book, it's slow in places, overly sentimental at times, but it's also honest, raw, and deeply humane. The next time you see someone struggling, someone society has written off, someone invisible, maybe think of Makar. Remember that they have an inner life as rich and complex as your own, that they're carrying burdens you can't see, and maybe, just maybe, that recognition, that simple act of seeing, is where change begins. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep reading, keep questioning, and keep looking for the humanity in everyone you meet.